every 21 hours. So it's everything from wildfires to earthquakes and flooding to single-family house fires.
Great. And Doctor?
Public health, as the name suggests, we are responsible for monitoring the health of the community and also for protecting it. And in doing that, we have several programs. One of them is public health preparedness, where one of the things we do is educate people and give them information as to how to protect themselves in cases of emergencies.
Great. And it's very critical for us to know not only what we're doing statewide, but how we can actually prepare ourselves individually to contribute to preparedness for any disaster. But again, today we're talking about heat and excessive heat impacts. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen how the East Coast has been hit by heat and what its effects are. So let's go ahead and take a look at some news clips.
Across half of the country, temperatures continue in the triple digits, and it's not just the heat in the mid-Atlantic region, but the aftermath of Friday's storms adding to the problems there. The death toll has now risen to 22. At the height of the storm, over 5 million people were without power. Now it's down to 1.9 million, and they continue without it all week.
And across D.C., Virginia, and Maryland, hundreds of neighborhoods look just like this. A massive tree down. In this case, it just missed this house. Power lines are down, and as you said, it is hot. Across the mid-Atlantic today, the most dangerous jobs had to belong to the crews strapped into cherry pickers, dressed in hot protective rubber gear and working to untangle what looked like a spider's web of downed electrical lines and snapped poles.
This was like a war zone here.
The threat was still very real.
A number of sections had hot spots where there were actually flames shooting up from those power lines.
With no power, hundreds of traffic lights remain dark and intersections dangerous. Staffers were relocating senior citizens from a home in Greenbelt, Maryland over the weekend.
They told me 7 days. Who can wait 7 days with 100 degrees?
Tonight, states of emergency remain in Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, and D.C., as 1 to 2 million people are still without power and suffering through triple-digit heat.
One of the things I find most interesting during heat emergencies, and that's some pretty impressive news clips, is that a lot of times we don't consider during the summertime the impacts to the power grids and infrastructure, such as emergency responders responding to homes that are being damaged by brittle trees falling down, being without power, and the larger impacts of that. What are some of the other things that you find in the line of work that you do that are like secondary emergencies to excessive heat that we need to keep in mind?
Well, obviously we have a large community of farmers and those that work in our farming community here in California. They're out there, they're working in the heat. So there's a challenge to getting them the message out there at the right time so they can take the right precautions. Many of them speak different languages. We need to give the message out in different languages, and we need to make it quick so they're aware of what's going on. The loss of power during heat events is very critical. That's when you lose cooling systems and you spike, the mortality rate at that point. So we work to augment local government's efforts. If there's power outages to critical facilities, especially the vulnerable populations, we try to bring in generators as quick as possible to help them bring back that power in cooling centers.
Individually, I know we're concerned about those of us fortunate enough to have AC cooling or whatever, we're concerned about our power bill going up. But it's really interesting when it's hot and the power grid goes down and you're lost with days. You've got days lost without the ability to cool in your homes. That's when other resources are put into place to help people, vulnerable communities. Dawn, can you talk a little bit about some of the vulnerable communities that are assisted through other resources such as the American Red Cross?
Yeah, one of the things that we try to strive with folks is that there are different places or ways where you can escape the heat. So some of the things that you can do is to go into a public setting, like maybe it's going to the mall or maybe the library or someplace or in a public environment, coffee shops, where you might be able to benefit from the cool air there. And just some of the simple reminders too about people not doing excessive exercise during the daytime hours, or making sure that you drink lots of liquids, water in particular, and just some really simple steps that folks can take.
And Doctor, what are some of the other things that you know of that could help us keep our health in place while we're dealing with some of these other impacts of heat to make sure that we're healthy so that we can take care of ourselves and our families?
Well, there are a few things that have been mentioned, and one of that is being in an air-conditioned area. If you don't have air conditioning at home, you could go to another place like a business or a library or a mall, and usually those are well air-conditioned. The other thing is making sure that you get plenty of fluids, especially for those who do have to do some strenuous exercises. You shouldn't wait to feel thirsty before you think of taking a drink. You need to do that continuously. And actually for strenuous exercise, it's advised that you have to take maybe 2 to 4 glasses per hour just to be able to keep up with the fluid that you're losing. Also to look out for those that are vulnerable, that has been mentioned, and these include groups like the children and the elderly, because they are sometimes not able to identify when they're in situations that are dangerous, and they need someone else to look out for them. So if you have a relative who is living alone, is elderly, make sure that you check on them maybe at least once or twice a day. Make sure that they're okay. And for children, make sure that they get the fluids that they need, make sure that they keep out of the sun, and make sure that if they are going out to play, that they have the appropriate dressing, which is light clothing, and make sure that, again, they have fluids and proper fluids, because sometimes people think that if you just give them pop or soda, that should be good. But some of those drinks have a lot of sugar in them, so you need to keep away from those. Water is actually probably the best way of keeping yourself hydrated. So
what about the drinks that the kids drink? And we know that the body needs water because we're 80% water, but sports athletes and teenagers and children, of course, they prefer the sweetness, but in the athletic world, they're drinking special sports drinks like Gatorade. Are those actually helpful during excessive heat, or is the recommendation to stay with water?
Those can help if the person has lost a lot of fluid through sweat, especially if they're doing strenuous exercise. But for the general population, for the most part, water is the best way to keep themselves rehydrated.
Another interesting thing too to consider during excessive heat is the impacts, and I mentioned impacts to infrastructure, but especially first responders in the medical community. You know, our ER rooms are already jam-packed on a daily basis and stressed beyond their capacity. And then when they start having the influx of people who are dealing with the impacts of heat on an emergency basis, it really does put a burden on our medical community. Let's go ahead and take a look at a video right now that talks specifically about the impacts to our emergency rooms from an emergency room doctor.
In California, emergency departments are already overwhelmed. We are filled to capacity on any given day. Add an environmental crisis such as a heat wave, and we get into meltdown. We have to drop what we're doing and attend the patient with heat stroke because that's a medical emergency. So basically, when heat stroke patients come in, we are taken away from the other patients who do need critical care also. My worry is if we have many days of high heat in the Sacramento Valley, say over 105 for a series of days, over 110, that we'll be inundated. Emergency departments within California will not have the capacity to care for people.
Okay, one thing I don't like to do when I'm not feeling well is have to wait in an emergency room. And as we can see from the video, that there's a reason why we have to wait when we go to the ER. They're stressed past capacity. And we're talking about what we can do to prepare ourselves for heat, how we can take care of ourselves. But doctor, are there symptoms that are indicative of serious heat exhaustion or heat stroke that we may want to be aware of prior to, ending up in the emergency room?
Some of the things to look out for: if the person starts feeling lightheaded, feels faint, is not able to sweat anymore, or becomes confused, or if the body temperature starts rising, especially if it gets up to 103 and over, then those are danger signs, and you need to make sure that a person like that gets the proper care, which includes taking them to a place that is cool, or maybe using cool water to try and get that body temperature down. If the person has passed out and is, not able to respond anymore, definitely that person needs to get emergency care and get rehydrated as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. And Dawn, I know the American Red Cross often participates in group sports activities. Is there anything in particular that the American Red Cross sees during large sporting events that is pretty typical as far as symptoms and how people react to heat while they're in an entertainment venue?
Well, I think some of the things of just being aware of, some of the things around heat exhaustion that you talked about earlier, and being aware of the people that you're with and just noticing and seeing, if they're slow to respond to things. But, for us, one of the things that in some of these events, it's some really common basic sense things of, wearing the light colored clothing, drinking, making sure that you're staying hydrated. But not to, if you see the person that you're with and they're acting a little goofy or strange or something, those are definitely signs to be aware of and to ask the questions. And even though people might be hesitant, I'm okay, it's always good to pull them aside.
Are there some critical assessment questions that we can ask somebody that's in the midst of a heat stroke or heat emergency that would give us clear signs? I mean, if Dawn and I were walking around the fair today and she said, well, Tina, you're acting a little goofy. Okay, well, yeah, I'm having a good time. But are there some very clear signs we can look at and say, okay, Dawn's not feeling well, even though she doesn't realize it, she's got some physical symptoms I'm seeing and I need to get her to shade? Is there anything like that we can kind of keep in our hip pocket?
Well, one thing is if you've been with the person and you're aware that they've been exposed to the heat for quite a long time, and maybe you notice that they haven't been drinking enough fluids, and also that they're not sweating, those are things to look out for. If they're not able to focus, if they are confused in the answers that they're giving you, then those are things that you need to look for. There's no magic question that you can ask, but if you're observing the person and they're not acting right, then you should just, take it and make sure that person
Does headache typically come with heat frustration?
Headache can, yes, with exhaustion, and that's one of the things that you can...
So if I'm walking around, say like I'm on vacation and I'm in a venue, and I'm noticing that I'm not perspiring, that I can't, maybe I haven't been drinking enough water, I can't quench my thirst, I've got a low-grade headache, and I'm feeling a little loopy or daisy, I should move just precautionary to the nearest booth or someone for assistance to get me to some medical attention.
That is very important to do. The first thing is to make sure you get that person out of the heat, get them to a cool area, and then make sure that you get fluids into them.
Well, fortunately, at venues such as the California State Fair, there's emergency responders ready and willing and able and set to take care of you. And we're going to go ahead and talk to Brad Alexander, our Cal EMA representative, with a representative from the California State Fair to talk about what resources are available here at the State Fair in case you have a heat emergency.
And we're here with Brian. And Brian, tell us what you do for the fair.
Well, I'm the Deputy General Manager. I've been here at Cal Expo for 24 years.
And in those 24 years, how has the fair been so far this year, you think?
Fair's been great. In fact, we just came off a record-breaking Wednesday where we had 55,000 people, largest attendance on a Wednesday in the history of the fair.
And today we're talking about heat, and obviously we don't have too many issues with heat today. What are the things that the officials at the fair, the employees at the fair know to do when the weather heats up like we expect this weekend, triple digits?
Well, it's always important for us, being that the fair is in July each year, we can expect some 100-degree temperatures. But we work with the media to communicate to people coming to the fair the importance of taking the necessary precautions, dressing appropriately, and then reminding them of all the things that the fair has to offer during the day that can be done during the hotter part of the day. We have 250,000 square feet of air-conditioned buildings that people can visit. And then all of our eating areas are shaded with misting systems. So relatively speaking, you can come out and have a fairly safe day at the fair and still enjoy it in the hot temperatures.
Events, that's really becomes devastating.
Now, you mentioned that heat in the valley is different than heat in the coastal regions. What is the true definition of excessive heat? You know, all of us have had a hot summer, but there is a very clear definition on what excessive heat is and when those alerts and warnings go out.
Excessive heat warning is it's a temperature, and it varies depending. It's a combination of temperature and humidity, because both together give the strongest effect on the human body. So we have excessive heat warnings that could hit any part of the state, but the people living in the deserts are more acclimated to hot weather, so they have better systems to deal with it. Their bodies are more used to it. They have more cooling systems. When you have an excessive heat warning in the coastal areas, a lot of these people don't have air conditioning. Their bodies are not used to or acclimated to the temperature there. So we work with the National Weather Service on looking at these different topographies. We look at history, we look at patterns in the past, mortality rates. So there's no one size fits all, but we're learning as we go on how to custom make these different warnings and alerts for different parts of the state.
Okay, so if you had to say the state of California had an emergency kit, what do you think the top 3 tools are for us to help local jurisdictions in a heat emergency?
Alert and warning, make sure that they're aware of what's coming down in a few days or a few weeks. Good public messaging, and you can make these canned public messages now and know how to get them out to all kinds of levels of government and private sector. And the state getting its act together and be ready to support these local governments. We work very closely with certain trigger points that we've developed with our state agencies and partners and the private sector. So we rehearse this, we plan, we fine tune it, and we get better every time we move along.
Awesome. So as an example, since you're like the holder of the toolkit for preparedness for the state of California, do you have an emergency supply kit ready to go?
I do have one. The kids continue to play with the flashlight all the time, so I need to change the batteries. But I truly do have one, and I try to promote this in my neighborhood and to my friends. That's
awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to learn a little bit about how to put a personal emergency kit together. So Dawn's going to help me with that. So come this way. Take your position, my dear, wherever you want to go.
All right.
Okay. So all of us should have an emergency supply kit, and the rule is to be able to sustain ourselves for 72 hours.
Exactly.
And ideally we would have one at home, at work. Should we have one in the car?
Absolutely, because you never know either. Thinking about wildfire situations, you might be returning home from work or who knows where and find out that you can't even access your home or from work or that type of thing. So those are 3 really great places to make sure you have some sort of kit available, home, work, and in your car.
Okay, great. Well, show us some of the stuff that would be staples.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't take much to create a kit, and you can actually start out gradually. But there's some basic items. Of course, you want something to hold your items in. But some of the things, as you mentioned, some key items. For 72 hours, you want to have a supply of water and some food items. We often recommend items that are non-perishable because those will store a little bit longer. And you can just have some simple things like granola bars, nuts, canned goods. If you get canned goods, make sure you have a can opener so you can access them. Also make sure some of the things around what we see in a lot of disaster situations or emergency situations is taking care of your pets. And so we've got here, your little dog dish or your cat dish and some pet food along with that. So you want to make sure to have those items. I think some of the things too is that when an event happens, you don't know as far as the safety of yourself and others, and so having a first aid kit is also a really important thing to have on hand as well. And I would say even just some of the other things, depending on where you're at in the circumstances, have a flashlight. The event might happen in the middle of the night, so have a flashlight, and as we just heard Moustafa, make sure the batteries are working. Have a crank radio available as well too, because one of the key things is making sure you're informed about what's happening around you. And so having something like that. So those are some basic things to get your kit started.
And I think that's something people need to realize is we're talking about heat emergency, but it could be if the power goes down because of heat, that trees and fuels are getting hot and crispy. You could be on your way home and your neighborhood could be being impacted. You need to be able to relocate and keep yourself healthy. So that's why we're talking about a comprehensive preparedness pack for excessive heat, because you really don't know where you're going to be when that disaster or emergency hits.
Exactly. And one of the things we also recommend for folks, because when something happens that quickly, if you're on using any sort of prescription drugs or medication, make sure you have some extra supplies of that on hand, or even have a copy of paperwork of what things you're on, so that like for us in our shelter locations, we have nurses and they can help get refills on that. So
that's incredible information. So if we don't have a backup prescription, as long as we have our prescription information and maybe doctor's contact information in our go bag, you guys can help us say, okay, we got to get this lined up.
Anything is helpful. Honestly, we have folks sometimes come to our shelters and they know that they're on some medication, but they don't necessarily know the name of it, trying to get contact. So having that type of information on hand is really helpful.
Great. Okay, so now we have something over here that looks like you brought your water today?
Yes, we did. So we talked about in a normal day for a man, for a woman, as you see from our lovely labels here, that for a gentleman that you would have a gallon of water that you would drink each day. And this is the equivalent of what somebody that's female like us that we would be drinking in a normal day. This is the amount. But when you have excessive heat, you want to drink about another quart of water on top of that. When it's really hot out, and so it's a lot of water. I think the key thing is just getting hydrated and making sure you maintain that. But this is a really great example to see how much water that is. And of course, we've already talked about making sure you have in your disaster kit, emergency kit, some supply for your pets, some pet food. We need water for your pet as well too.
And wouldn't you say that pets are actually one of the underrepresented communities in emergency? I mean, we've seen from past disasters where we think we're ready to mobilize our pets and take care of our pets, but a lot of the times we don't, and we don't even know when they're being impacted by heat. Specifically, dogs always pant. Dogs always take a nap in the shade. There's some signs that may be a little more or less noticeable in an animal. So for more information on animal impacts and what you need to look for your fur babies and your family, I'm going to toss it back to Brad, and he's going to speak to a representative from Sacramento SPCA.
Are we ready? Okay, so I'm here with Leslie from the SPCA, and Leslie, tell me what you do with the SPCA.
I'm the Director of Marketing and Public Relations, and I've been there for about 7 years.
Okay, and where is the SPCA in Sacramento?
We're located at 6201 Florin Perkins Road in South Sacramento.
Okay, and what kind of services does the SPCA provide?
Everything from obviously adoptions to a lot of spay-neuter. We'll spay and neuter about 27,000 animals this year. We offer special services to seniors, to kids. We do classroom visits, humane education, behavior and training.
And what do you urge people to do during hot weather days, during the June, July, August times for animals during hot weather?
First and foremost, I say to people, bring them inside. Just if you've got an animal that's usually an outdoor animal, bring them in. If you absolutely can't, make sure you're providing plenty of shade, cool water, and maybe even a kiddie pool with some water in it so they can cool off outside.
And I think we have some video that we took from the SPCA shelter, and if we could go to that now.
We will take in about 13,500 animals this year, homeless animals, just here at the Sacramento SPCA alone. We do adoptions, we do dog training, we have a free behavior helpline, we run a series of summer camps, which are going on right now. We have a growing number of services for both humans and animals in the greater Sacramento region. We're at the Sacramento SPCA on Florin Perkins Road in Sacramento. Things that people should be on the lookout for, signs of heat exhaustion include if temperatures rise above, say, 103, that's a serious condition. People should be on the lookout for animals with excessive panting, drooling, bright red gums, lethargy, indicate that an animal could be experiencing heat stress. If you do suspect that your animal is experiencing heat stress, we recommend that you cool that animal down, not with ice cold water, but with cool water, a hose, a kiddie pool with some water in it. Immediately alert your veterinarian and get that animal in, because even if the animal starts to show that they're feeling better, there still could be lingering after effects of that heat exhaustion. 5 things that I think people should watch for in the summer. First and foremost, keep them out of the car, bring them in the house. If they must be outside, keep them cool. Watch for fleas and ticks. Watch for other people's animals. Watch for those, watch for the animal in the parking lot. Keep an eagle eye out for animals that might be under duress in a heated car. And know the signs of heat stress. Know your animal well enough to know if they're showing symptoms of heat stress or heat exhaustion.
And welcome back. Hopefully that was some helpful information for you. Leslie, what was some information in that video that we weren't seeing?
Well, a couple of the things are how to cool your animal down if they have been overheated. And that would involve putting cool water on them, never cold. You don't want to bring their temperature down too much. You can give them ice cubes to lick, and then immediately call your veterinarian if you even assume that they are suffering from heat exhaustion. One of the things that we like to promote to businesses around town is to put up posters in their windows urging people not to leave their animals in hot cars. We also have postcards that people can put on windshields of animals in cars where animals have been left. And it's also important to know that it is California state law that it's illegal to leave your animal an unattended animal in a parked car.
And as a proud owner of 3 drooly, hairy basset hounds, if there's any way that you want to make me very angry is leave your dog in a car for any extended period of time. I don't understand why you would think that was a good idea. And obviously, Leslie, that's some good advice for people to notify a police officer or a firefighter nearby when they can get some service to that animal immediately.
You bet, because they do have the authority to break windows, break into cars, and help that animal right away. Very important.
Thank you, Leslie, and we're going to take it back to Tina.
Okay, great, thank you. So we talked about animal safety and some of the symptoms to look for, checking the color of their gums, make sure they get plenty of water just like us. During heat, considering staying hydrated, another concern is food, right? I mean, when animals get hot, they change their diets naturally. I notice my dogs will not eat and chew on grass instead. What are some of the food health things that we need to pay special attention to while we're in the summertime?
Well, one of the important things is to eat light meals, because heavy meals or very hot meals will make it difficult for you to maintain your temperature. So just make sure that you take very light meals, and make sure you check, especially if they have dairy products, if they have egg in them. If, say, you're going to the fair and you have your lunch in a lunchbox, make sure you check it before you eat it, because it can go bad very quickly.
Okay.
And if you have, if the electricity is out, make sure that you're considering what food that you're eating or maybe not eating. So after the electricity goes out, start with food items that are in your refrigerator, and then eventually, you can go to items that are in your freezer, but still, you also want to check. I mean, don't just think by just smelling something and it doesn't seem to smell funny that it might be safe. It's really a matter of what the temperature of the food item is and whether it's safe or not to eat.
Okay. And would you say, doctor, that, I've heard on the news lately to eat your water, where they're pushing eating fruits like watermelon and cantaloupe and celery. Does that really contribute to our hydration?
That is a good idea, to make sure that you eat foods that will help you to hydrate. So watermelon is really good during the heat, and also make sure that you get plenty of fruit as well.
Okay, great. Well, that's really interesting information. And like I said earlier, everybody, we really want you to be part of the conversation. So if you have any questions for Cal EMA or any one of our representatives, please feel free to email us at questions@calema.ca.gov, or you can hit us on Twitter @CalEMA. In parting comments, you guys have anything else you'd like to share?
Thank you for having us, and stay cool, everybody. We're still in the middle of summer, so there's a lot more heat coming.
I guess I think I would reiterate the same thing, and also just to stay informed. I mean, don't just assume that, it's a little bit cooler today, it's a little bit warmer, but really take caution, the precautionary measures, and be informed.
One last thought is when you're driving, going places, shopping, make sure you don't leave your pets or children in the car, because even if it's a very short time, you may underestimate just how quickly the temperature can rise, even when you have the windows down. So it's advisable that you do not leave children or pets in the car.
Definitely. I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is understanding that there's a heat contingency plan available at the state of California that helps all of us respond to heat emergencies. There's groups like the American Red Cross that are on standby to help us do outreach and education and actually respond in a medical capacity if needed, and wonderful professionals at the state and local level, such as Dr. Kasirye, who are very knowledgeable and can help us understand better our resources at the local level. Again, if you have any questions, please contact us. Check out our website at calema.ca.gov. And thank you for joining us.